Hi, I'm Paul Guppy, Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update of activities that we've been doing over the last month or so, the issues that we've been tackling, and then some of the fun events that we have coming up. So first of all, we're coming to the end of summer. We've had a very busy summer, which in the policy world is supposed to be, quote, slow time. It never does seem to quite slow down. So our staff has been busy on a number of different issues that are important to the people of Washington State. And we had a great event earlier in September in Spokane. We had our annual dinner. It was a lot of fun. The program was a little different. We had a panel of Fox commentators. I'm not sure if we'll stick with that model in the future, but it was fun for that night, and everyone had a good time. We had great attendance, and of course, it's an important fundraising dinner for us, and that came out well as also. And next coming up, I'll have some information on our Bellevue dinner, which is coming up in mid-October, and I'll have details about that towards the end of this presentation. But most importantly, the other organizational development for us is we've been bringing some new talent into the organization. It's really exciting. We have a new chief of staff. We're hiring a new development director. We will soon have a new director for Eastern Washington. And as someone who's been with Washington Policy Center for a long time as I have, it's really great to see very motivated and very capable new professionals come into Washington Policy Center. It's also exciting as kind of a movement conservative that even a think tank that's located in supposedly very blue Washington State does attract solid, smart conservatives who want to advance their career by working on issues in this state. So we're excited about that as well. And speaking of issues, here's an update on some of the things that we've been covering. So once again, it's deja vu all over again in Bellingham. There are two initiatives on the ballot coming up in November. We have written a citizens guide analysis on each one of them. They are they're not very creative in Bellingham, so they're called Initiative 1 and Initiative 2, and they're on the same topics that were voted on by voters a few years ago. One is an increase in the local minimum wage. This would push the minimum wage to $1 over the state minimum wage, which is already one of the highest in the country. And then in the second year, it would be $2 over the state minimum wage. So as the state minimum wage goes up, the wage in the Bellingham labor market would be at least $2 more than that. This is a great way to put young people out of work, and that's what we continually point out. Minimum wage functions as a wage control, and what it does is basically, whether you're talking about other countries or historically or in the United States today, every time the government imposes a wage control, they put people out of work. They also create a black market. So we think that starting wages, training wages should be low and accessible. That helps teenagers, legal immigrants to this country who are trying to build a life, young people who are trying to just get started out of high school or college. But this is on the ballot in Bellingham. Mark Harmsworth on our staff has done an analysis that explains the negative economic effects, hurting small business. The other problem with a local minimum wage is it just causes displacement. So small businesses, workers, working families who can't make it in Bellingham end up just moving out to other communities. We have pointed all this out. We did the same analysis last time. The voters agreed with us and they defeated this initiative, and we think they're going to defeat it again. The second one is on another dumb idea from the left, and that is rent control. Same idea. Rent control is a price control. This initiative was tried before. It was defeated before. We did an analysis on it for the voters in the past and prevailed. And we have a adjunct scholar who lives in the Bellingham area. He has written an analysis for us on the harm of rent control. And we just put out that study recently, again, in plenty of time for mail-in ballots in the area. And we're confident that we'll win on that one again, too. So we are happy to fight these fights all day long. The argument against them is very strong. The group that's pushing it is called, I had it here. Anyway, a Bellingham group that's been put together. These groups pop up and then they disappear, which makes it easy for us to argue against them because they don't have any institutional base. The Washington Policy Center is present all the time, every day, all year long. And as I pointed out regarding the past initiatives, we have the depth to come back and argue these same issues again. very successfully. We will likely have a guest op-ed in the Bellingham Herald, and we're working with Cascade News and some other outlets in the area to get our message out. So we'll see how that happens. Speaking of local, we are careful not to get sucked into Seattle issues constantly. We are a statewide organization. However, we know that Seattle is important, and so we don't want to abandon it altogether. And Mark Harmsworth on our staff has written about how to solve homeless issues, how to deal with affordable housing. We point out that 2 Target stores have already closed in Seattle. QFC supermarkets have closed a couple of stores in Seattle, and hundreds of small businesses have had to shut down because of declining conditions in Seattle. We are promoting positive solutions to that. But beyond that, we are really pushing back against the cultural left, who claims that these easy theft policies, homelessness, homeless encampments, RVs where a lot of crime and drugs go on, human trafficking even, that somehow this is a compassionate social justice policy. What we point out is justice means protecting people's rights and providing peace and order in the community. And even far left Seattle, where about 80% of, I live in Seattle, so 80% of my neighbors are Democrats. Most of them are kind of standard down the line liberals. And even they are getting frustrated with the decline of quality of life. It's one thing to argue the economics, which we certainly will. Seattle needs a thriving downtown. It's a regional center for our entire Northwest region. It's an important transportation and financial hub. All of that is true. But on top of that, we point out that if you want to promote justice and if you support democracy, enforcing the basic protection of property rights, the ability to live peacefully in your community, that's justice as well. So there's a practical reason and a principled reason. And that's why we have decided to get involved in some Seattle issues. Another Seattle issue that's kind of interesting for Elizabeth on our staff is she was personally attacked by the Stranger newspaper, fringy, far left newspaper based in Seattle. They went after her because Washington Policy Center opposes the long-term care payroll tax. We think that long-term care coverage should be available in the private market. It should be affordable and competitive prices. We don't have that right now, so the legislature has imposed this new tax. Elizabeth is the leading independent voice presenting facts and information against it. But the Stranger discovered that years ago, Elizabeth had had a skiing accident in which she had been harmed. She was in the hospital for some time, eventually recovered, but they've ferreted out this story and went after her by saying, oh, you're privileged because you got good health care and your friends were available to help you. And not everybody else has that. So therefore, we need this socialized long-term care program. But I'm only giving the overview. This was a nasty, mean-spirited personal attack directed right at her. And she rose to the occasion and pushed back against them and said, it's not fair what you're arguing. There's no reason to create a mandatory socialized program. And she got right in there and tangled with them. We take advantage of stories like that because we go online and explain our position. It allows us to spread the message about creating consumer-directed healthcare and empowering people to buy their own coverage. But the personal aspect of it is kind of tough, and Elizabeth gained a lot of support online because of that. I mention it because we are more than happy to push back against the most aggressive side on the left. We know that they get nasty, mean, personal. They use personal insults. They will call you every name in the book. And we're prepared for that, but we're also not intimidated. And intellectually, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Our attitude is that your strongest argument, that you're going to attack our healthcare analyst and call her names and go after her personal history? So for us, it just creates a platform, or a megaphone, I should say, for us to advance our free market healthcare ideas. So in a way, the Stranger was doing us a favor, and we're not intimidated by the fact that they're in the Seattle market. We are happy to debate them anytime, anywhere. Beyond that, again, last Seattle issue is the Seattle Council is proposing a delivery tax for services like Uber and DoorDash that provide direct residential services. This grew during COVID when we were all in lockdown in our homes. And of course, Seattle wants to impose a new tax on that. The balance for us is to not get drawn into constantly debating the Seattle City Council, which would consume all the resources of our organization, and we're not going to do that. We're a statewide organization, but we recognize that Seattle is on the leading edge of these ideas, and that once a delivery tax is in place, low-income consumers and working families are going to have to pay it. It's highly regressive. So we are presenting a strong argument against it to, number one, defeat it in Seattle by showing how unfair it is. And number two, preventing that idea from spreading to other communities. We've done this on minimum wage and some other economic restrictions, and we think it will work on this issue as well. Right now, and we're getting in early, because right now, this is just a proposal. There was a staff briefing in the Seattle City Council. We're responding to the slide presentation that was given by the staff. And we think we can stop this idea in its tracks and that it won't even get to the point of getting to a vote. And we'll see how that goes. And lastly, jumping to statewide issues, we were encouraged that Governor Inslee is sticking with our recommendation to provide tutoring funds for students across the state. This dates back to earlier in the year when we were in the legislative session. Lee Finna, our education expert, had pointed out that we have $127 million in unspent COVID funds. Senator Braun, a Republican, had introduced an amendment to direct these funds for remedial education for kids who had been locked out of school for 2 years. That amendment succeeded, but we didn't let it was put into the budget. We did not let it go there. Lee was following up in the last few months, and she noticed that the governor had exercised a line item veto of this part of the budget. So she was concerned that maybe he had struck this out. She contacted the governor's office. They got back to her immediately and said, nope, the governor is completely dedicated to providing tutoring funds for kids. He agrees with the Braun amendment, which means he agrees with Washington Policy Center's recommendations, and they provided direct assurance that these funds would be used for that purpose. Lee was more than happy to go online and report that. We often disagree with the governor, as everyone knows, but in this case, we complimented him for adopting a smart policy, directing these funds to help kids, and hopefully that will improve the education quality in our public schools. So that was a positive outcome. Next, we are looking forward to our next live on the go presentation, which will be on October 3rd. And then we have our Bellevue dinner coming up on October 13th and at the Bellevue Hyatt. It should be very exciting. We're having Sebastian Gorka speak to the group then. That's interesting because he will provide an overview of what's happening in American politics today. That's usually very informative for our audience. We'll also have some of our own policy analysts giving presentations about what's happening at the state level. And on top of that, along with our major dinner, we also have our young professionals dinner, which happens on the same night. They have their own speaker, which is Jonathan Cho, again, a cutting-edge reporter on the front lines in Seattle, talking about how to deal with homelessness, shoplifting, and how to promote good policies, not only in Seattle, but throughout our entire region. And that should be a lot of fun. Also, young professionals did their annual summer hike in the Cascades, led by Todd Myers, our environmental expert. And this is a fun event. It gets people involved, and it's particularly geared towards younger people who want to do something social, something active outdoors, combined with a presentation by Todd about environmental policy. So the Young Professionals Program has been a great way to get younger people involved with Washington Policy Center, and we're going to continue to put on those events. So that's the current update, and I will be back in the future with another update. And until then, thank you.